So I think it's about balancing everything. If you don't crack it in the first exam, first attempt, second attempt, then probably you should look for a job. So I gave a prelims in 2019 and I was not able to clear. But somehow with a little bit of luck, I was almost there. I think the cutoff was about 97, 98. And without much preparation and with a lot of luck, I was able to get about 95. Then COVID happened and then I gave my 2020 attempt. Then I got into service. Then I wrote again. So I was looking at, as I said, the Indian IAS, IPS or IFS. And then I got into IPS second time. But somehow I wanted to, my main idea was I wanted to work in diverse areas. So whatever is written specifically in the syllabus, that's one. Second is the current affairs, 1 year and whatever is important. And then thirdly, the previous year questions. So I personally believe, be it the prelims, be it the mains, nothing comes out of these three. Again, coming from architecture background, I wanted my answers to stand out a little. So there, how can it stand out? One is the presentation, you add the graphs, diagrams, all that. Secondly, I felt factual content. It requires a lot of effort in note making and reading, specifically based on, as I said, PYQ, based on syllabus content and the current. So I tried to focus more on note making, on increasing the specificity. But most of my notes were for mains, because mains, I think it is entirely predictable. Unlike prelims where you need a little more reading, you never know from where exactly it will come. But in mains, it's a little more predictable. So if you have solid notes for PYQ, solid notes for the areas that are specifically mentioned in the syllabus, then I think any year, whichever question comes, it's always the same. It's almost the same, just the wording changes. I think current affairs is very important. But again, newspaper or magazines, so I focus more on newspapers.
Hello everyone, this is your host Avinash Agarwal. In the last 15 years, I've interviewed and interacted with hundreds of toppers of different competitive examinations to understand what is that differentiated topper from an average student. Why is that somebody prepares, competes and tops the examination almost effortlessly, and on the contrary, there are thousands or probably lakhs of students who burn midnight oil, who give up their best and forget about topping the examination. They are not even able to clear the examination. कुछ तो ऐसा है जो टॉपर को पता है, कुछ तो ऐसा है जो टॉपर कर रहा है, बाकी स्टूडेंट्स नहीं कर रहे हैं। और उस कुछ को जानने के लिए आज हमारे साथ हैं पीके सिद्धार्थ राम कुमार, जिन्होंने यूपीएससी सीएसई 2023 में ऑल इंडिया रैंक 4 के साथ इस एग्जाम को टॉप किया है। राम कुमार की कहानी बड़ी ही इंटरेस्टिंग है और बड़े ही अप्स एंड डाउन्स के साथ है। इट इज अ स्टोरी ऑफ पेशेंस एंड परसिवरेंस. He has not only cleared, or he has not only topped the examination in 2023, but rather it would not be wrong to say that he has cracked this examination 4 times. Ram Kumar graduated with architecture in 2020. So his first attempt was in 2019. Ram Kumar did graduation from architecture Ram Kumar did graduation in architecture from Trivandrum in 2019. So his first attempt was in 2019, where he could not even clear prelims. In 2020, he cleared the examination and got Indian Post and Telecommunication. In 2021, he again cleared the examination, and this time he got an IPS with West Bengal cadre.
Yes.
He cleared the examination, and this time he got IPS with West Bengal cadre, but he was looking for something more. He was looking for something different. In his 4th attempt, which was in 2022, he again got an IPS. But as I said that he was looking for something more, in 2023, he cleared and topped the examination with All India rank 4. So welcome, Sidharth. And your story is, as I said, is a story of patience and perseverance. So first of all, before we get into before we deep dive into the interview, I would just like you to, cover up in short your story from an aspirant to cracking the examination. How did it happen? Why were you giving attempts after attempt? What is that you were looking for?
So I graduated in architecture from Kerala University in 2019. August, and then so I wanted to know, so I was initially having a plan to try urban planning or something at that level, and then that is when I actually stumbled upon civil services. So I thought about how good a platform civil services might be, and even somewhere you can work upon things like urban development, you can be part of things like education, you can work in different spheres, different ministries. And somewhere I was fascinated by all three. I was somewhere fascinated by the Indian Foreign Service, Indian Police Service, and the Indian Administrative Service. So I tried a prelims in just before my graduation. That 2019 prelims, I didn't prepare much, but I wanted to know whether I should get into this journey or not. So I gave a prelims in 2019, and I was not able to clear. But somehow, with a little bit of luck, I was almost there. I think the cutoff was about 97, 98. And without much preparation and with a lot of luck, I was able to get about 95. So somewhere I felt this exam is actually crackable. And then I started preparing. I went to Delhi. I started preparing a little for my optional. Then came back. Then COVID happened, and then I gave my 2020 attempt. Then I got into service. Then I wrote again. So I was looking at, as I said, the Indian IAS, IPS, or IFS, and then I got into IPS second time. But somehow I wanted to, like, my main idea was like I wanted to work in diverse areas to have a diverse, enriching work experience. So that is why I gave it another attempt, and then it didn't change. So then again, I gave another attempt. I had taken leave from Police Academy. So I gave another attempt last year, and then this time somehow things fell in place and I got.
But why only IAS? What is that what fascinated you so much that inspired, getting Indian Postal and Telecommunication in the first attempt, then twice getting IPS, and still you were looking for IAS, and that UPSC CSE is a very tricky and very uncertain examination.
Yes.
So what is that you were looking? Why only IAS? Why not IPS?
Sir, as I said, I have huge respect, and I actually wanted IPS also. But somewhere I felt probably I was a lot more suited to IAS, and I had that a little more in my mind when I started. And I wanted to work in diverse areas. Like all the other services are like specialists in their area, like policing, foreign service. So I have huge respect, and I was interested also. But in IAS, you are able to work in multiple areas. Like the opportunity to be able to work in multiple spheres is a little more in the administrative service, because it is a generalist service.
I'm sure ये क्वेश्चन इंटरव्यू के दौरान भी कई बार आया होगा, हॉन्ट भी किया होगा, क्यों जाना चाहते हैं, आईपीएस आपको मिल गया, क्यों छोड़ना चाहते हैं?
Sir, actually, I prepared for that question, but it didn't come.
Okay. No, I thought that since the answer is so, it almost looks like a natural flow. So I thought that you must have prepared it really well.
I did prepare for 2 years.
Okay, so what was the difference between the second attempt? Let's leave the first attempt wherein you said that you were not very well prepared and you just gave the exam on a random basis.
Yes.
And you got the feeling that it is doable, it is crackable.
Yes.
तो वो तो पहले साल आपने तैयारी की होगी, but 2021 to 22, 22 to 23 ये 2-3 साल जो थे इन तैयारियों में second, third, fourth, fifth attempt में क्या difference था? मतलब या तैयारी more or less बराबर ही रही? It is just a matter of chance. What is that you would say?
So 2020, that is my the first serious attempt that I gave. So that is when I actually prepared for prelims, optional, everything separately, properly. I gave a year of preparation. That year, my mains mark was not that great. I had pretty good marks in interview, and my optional mark was also decent, 280 plus in anthro, and nearly 187 in interview. So that was why I got into the service. My mains mark was like less. So that year I felt I probably focused a little more on what everyone was doing, like what all content is like there in magazines, like content magazines usually. I tried to focus only on that, and I didn't innovate a little, or I didn't focus much on the previous year questions. Like there are some things which everyone says, but then we tend to tide over them. Like we think it's not so important. We think probably there are other things. Okay, this test series is giving this, so that is probably a little more important. So in that way, probably in that attempt, I didn't focus on previous year questions. I didn't focus much on my note making. But after that, last 3 years, I've been getting almost same mark in my general studies. 1 year interview went down. 2 years optional mark was not that great. So between this attempt and last attempt, when I got 121 rank, and this year I got 4th attempt, the only change, my interview mark was same, GS mark was almost same. In fact, it reduced a little. Only main difference was optional. It went up by 66 marks. So I somehow feel last 2-3 attempts it has been almost same, because preparation, content, everything has been relatively same. But my first attempt and the last 3 attempts has been different.
So why I am asking this question specifically is that because when we interact with aspirants, usually the notion which we get is that कि भाई IAS की तैयारी करनी है, इसको crack करना तो 3-4 attempt तो मान के ही चलो. And on the contrary, in the last week itself, I have interviewed a lot of students who have cracked UPSC in the first attempt itself. So what I'm trying, since you were able to get what you wanted in the 5th attempt, तो बहुत से लोग इस बात से ये भी समझ सकते हैं कि शायद इसकी तैयारी 4-5 साल की है. So was there any significant difference in the preparation or is it just a matter of after a level the tayari kind of saturates and plateaus, and after that you have to leave it probably to the god?
Sir, I don't know. I think for some people, probably they might change a lot every year. But somehow for me, for last 3 attempts, so I've given 4 serious attempts. Last 3 attempts, it has been almost the same. Because I got into IPS, then I took leave, I wrote again, almost same mark. Only interview fell down. Then next time, only optional fell down. But preparation was the same. So I think it was like a little bit of things falling in place after the first attempt. Like after my Indian Post and Telecom attempt, I think it has been relatively same. Somehow I did focus a little more on things that were not giving me much marks. My essay and optional papers were not fetching me good marks. So I focused a little more on that. But other than that, largely, I don't think there was much change in my preparation.
So we would come to essay and optional, which you just said. But another question which is coming to my mind is that, so does that mean, or can we say that once you start preparing for UPSC, however this, this would depend from aspirant to aspirant, but in a very broad manner, can we say that when you start preparing, जो तैयारी करनी है आपकी 1-2 साल में हो जाती है?
Yes.
Why I'm asking this is that because यूजुअली एस्पिरेंट्स ये समझते हैं कि भैया 5 साल यूपीएससी के नाम कर दो, कुछ भी नहीं करना. सो व्हाट यू डिड एंड इट लुक्स एज एन हिंडसाइट, इट लुक्स वेरी इंटेलिजेंट कि आप 1-2 साल में तैयारी कर लीजिए, उसके बाद आप अगर जॉब में हैं तो आप जॉब करते रहिए, सिमिलरली थोड़ी बहुत तैयारी करके देते रहिए. कॉन्ट्रेरी टू दिस, दूसरा ओपिनियन ये है कि सब कुछ छोड़ दो, 5 साल के लिए सब यूपीएससी पे दो.
So that's true. Like I think 1 to 2 years of preparation is good enough, and even I personally think my actual base, whatever I've studied, whatever I've used for the exam, would have been what I've prepared in 2020 for the 2020 attempt and 21 attempt a little. After that, everything has been slight modifications, what's working, what's not working, a little bit on note making, a little bit of innovation. So I don't think you should think about 5 years, and I think it's important to have a job also. Especially at some point, we don't know. There is a level of randomness that is there in the exam. So at some point, I think it's important to have a job after 2-3 attempts at least. And it's important to have a mindset that you will crack it in the first serious attempt itself. So I think it's about balancing everything. If you don't crack it in the first exam, first attempt, second attempt, then probably you should look for a job. That's what I personally feel. And once you've gotten there, like once you've cracked the service, if you think you want to write it again, then probably write it along the way.
So there are two interesting things which is coming out of the conversation we just have had. Is that one is that what Sidharth said is that usually when we are preparing, we at times take the advice which everybody is giving too casually, and then we realize that this is probably the mistake. And this he specifically referred keeping previous year questions in mind. I mean,
yes, sir.
Another thing which is said is that कि तैयारी जितनी होनी होती है वो 1 साल 2 साल में हो सकती है, 3 साल में हो सकती है. After that, do not blindly run after UPSC CSE. You can parallelly join a job. And keep on giving your whatever attempts are left, and so that there is a balance, there is a momentum, and there is an alternate path also, rather than blindly following it up for 5-6 years and then realizing, because as he has rightly said, that there is huge amount of randomness in this examination. Yes. So coming back, Sidharth, you just referred about how do you actually stay focused, or how do you actually decide the resources, the preparation resources for an exam in which they say that everything under the sun comes. How do you decide that how much wide, how much deep, when they say that anything can be asked, what to do, what not to do? Because at times when I speak to a lot of aspirants, I think many of them tend up doing what not to do. So understanding, what not to do probably is as important as what to do.
Yes, sir. So I have generally arrived at this conclusion that it's important to simplify. Like end of the day, you have to. So I have realized that everything comes from a triad of there's a base syllabus content that is given for every area in history, what all are there, in geography, what all are there. So whatever is written specifically in the syllabus, that's one. Second is the current affairs, like 1 year and whatever is important. And then thirdly, the previous year questions. So I personally believe, be it the prelims, be it the mains, nothing comes out of these three. So if you are relatively prepared in the previous year questions, especially the last 10 years after 2013 when the pattern changed, and you are well versed, aware of the things that are happening in the last 1 year, not just the magazines, also the newspapers. And then if you have focused well on the syllabus content, like whatever is specifically given in the syllabus, I think you should be relatively well placed to clear the exam.
So cutting you short, so there are 3 pillars which Sidharth has just identified, which should act as a foundation of your preparation. One is the syllabus. Syllabus should be the basic reference document which should which should decide everything. Second is the PYQs, and third is the current affairs and understanding the current affairs in the right context.
Yes.
Sorry, I cut you.
No, sir. I was just reiterating this.
So, anything specific and anything specific about कि कितना कौन से resources करनी चाहिए, कौन से resources नहीं करने चाहिए, या इन्हीं तीन चीजों पे ध्यान रखना है हमें?
So what I try to do is like, so I did my preparation mostly from Kerala, from Cochin, because again COVID. So I mostly did my preparation alone from this thing. I did take some content and help. So whatever I felt is like I tried to find out what the toppers are doing. I tried to find out what is common between every one of them. Like only the common thing I try to do. So that will be like less, because a lot of people will be doing a lot of different things. But you find out what everyone is doing, like what every topper talk that you're seeing, everyone is doing commonly. Like there'll be a set of basic books, a set of NCRTs they're asking to read, a set of answer writing tips, a set of things they'll try to be focusing on. And I just try to limit myself to that. And then somewhere I try to increase the specificity of my answers, especially in mains. Like I felt again, coming from architecture background, I wanted my answers to stand out a little. So there, how can it stand out? One is the presentation, you add the graphs, diagrams, all that. Secondly, I felt factual content. It requires a lot of effort in note making and reading, specifically based on, as I said, PYQ, based on syllabus content and the current. So I tried to focus more on note making, on increasing the specificity.
आपने note making पे बहुत focus किया, and
Yes, sir.
actually I also feel that because for an exam wherein the syllabus is so diverse and both in width and depth, तो उसमें revision बड़ा important है, because as
Yes.
you said that factual contents add power to your answers,
Yes.
and in order to reproduce factual contents under time pressure, you need rapid revision, and that's how we
Yes.
come to notes.
Yes.
So what was the methodology? How important is note making? Because I have met students who have cracked this examination, and I met students who have diverse opinions. Somebody says that he made notes only for mains, no notes for prelims में उसने किताब से ही किया. What is your take on this? What kind of note making, and for all levels were you making, or for all subjects were you making? Somebody said that he made notes only for optionals.
So I did make some notes for prelims, but for prelims, my idea was like, I'll read more. I'll make notes only for areas which I don't want to repeat. Like let's say I was not very favorable in terms of reading the NCRTs again and again. I started with my base books, but then I didn't want to miss out on anything that was in the NCRT. So I read it once, whatever is important, especially 11th and 12th, and then some history books from 6 to 10. I just read it once. I made little notes on content which I don't need to read it again. So I don't have to like waste my effort again. And for some areas, like let's say in economy, some PYQ questions which are a little conceptual. Few areas I did make some notes, history, economics, polity, but most of my notes were for mains, because mains, I think it is entirely predictable. Unlike prelims where you need a little more reading, like you never know from where exactly it will come. But in mains, it's a little more predictable. So if you have solid notes for PYQ, solid notes for the areas that are specifically mentioned in the syllabus, then I think any year, whichever question comes, it's always the same. Like it's almost the same, just the wording changes. Just a little bit of change in the demand of the question. You have the same notes, you can use it, tweak a little and use it accordingly. So I had specific notes for each GS. Like GS1 separate book, 2 separate, 3 separate, 4 separate, optional again separate notes. And I kept on adding, like based on current, based on revision, I try to make it simpler, add a value addition graphs. And then I had a basic framework for answer writing also. Like basic structure, like the introduction, body, conclusion. In body, how do you divide it separately? Like for every area in GS, let's say if it's art and culture, like generally questions are asked from architecture or literature. So I had a frame for architecture. Like if an architecture question comes in the body, how do I hit? Like which all dimensions should I hit? Like it could be materials, it could be structure, it could be aesthetics. In that way for architecture, in that way for literature, in that way for history, geography, like every major area. So I had the frame prepared for every area. I had the introductions, conclusions, and the frame. And then based on the question, I just had to tweak the information.
Sidharth, you also, multiple times referred, and you said that current affairs is one of the pillars on which the entire preparation stands, or entire preparation revolves. And there are many opinions on how should you go about preparing current affairs and the importance of current affairs preparation. Somebody says that it is not current affairs, it is contemporary affairs, because the term itself looks so wide that everything can come. So how do you actually go about preparing for current affairs, and how do you keep yourself updated? There are aspirants whom I met, they said that newspaper reading may not be a very good idea. So what is your take on all these things?
So I think current affairs is like very important because whatever is asked, I feel something is asked only if it has some form of contemporary or future relevance. Like it's a very competitive exam, but it's also an exam that tries to find out, like, pick people for public policy. So I think only if something is like relevant in terms of its importance for India's future, or in general for understanding something that is generally there in the contemporary times, only then it will be asked. So in that, from that standpoint, I think current affairs is very important. But again, newspaper or magazines. So I focus more on newspapers, but I did read compilations because I think both serve different purposes. Like reading newspaper is very important because it helps you build the base. It helps you understand what areas were more important. Like let's say in 1 year, if you have been following the newspaper, you'll understand which areas were of relatively more significant. Like which areas are more important, which areas were in the news more, which were coming in explained section, which were coming in the front page more, which is related for India's development a little more. And in the other times, like compilations are useful because there are lots of little bits and pieces of news, especially from prelims perspective, like environment, science and tech and all that, which might not be there in the headlines or in the columns as such. So you might need to read the compilations also a little. So I think a bit mix of both.
Another thing I would like to clarify, because this is one thing which seems to be missing out of the conversation, and whenever I speak to students who have successfully cracked the examination, they give a lot of importance and emphasis to it, and this is about writing mock test. So what was what was the importance of mock test? How do you improve your performance, or how do you used to evaluate you both for prelims as well as mains? Because I have met people who have cracked. They have said that for prelims they gave as many as 100 mock tests.
So for prelims, again, only in my 2020 attempt, when I had time, then I think I did give it about 50 to 100. I don't know exact number, but 50 to 60 at least. I did give 50 to 60 tests. And in that also, I focus more on areas which are like conceptual, like polity, economy. I think are better bets in terms of tests also, because your understanding improves. And reading the basic books again and again is not. It's very time consuming. But if you do 3 to 4 tests in polity, it improves your revision also. Same for economy. So for prelims, in that attempt, I did write a lot of tests. After that, I didn't get time because I was giving interview, getting result, and then into 5 days giving prelims again. So tests after that, I did write, but very few. For mains, again, only in 2020 and 21 attempt, I wrote more. After that, I did write, but few here and there. In 2020 attempt, I properly wrote 8 tests of anthropology, my optional, and I did write about 8 to 10 GS. After that, like 4 to 5 or 5 to 6 every year. Like it's a balance between answer writing and note making. So I tended to focus more on note making because I tried to deconstruct it in terms of the structure, in terms of what the introduction will be, what are the areas I should hit. So I believe, like, because sometimes I feel underconfident when I'm writing a test, even after getting rank 121. So I used to focus more on note making, on brainstorming, on having proper content, the structure ready, so that whatever question comes, I'll be able to use that structure and tweak it a little according to the demand of the question.
So what I understand is that in the second attempt, which was in 2020, you said that you had time, so you gave a lot of emphasis, and you gave, let's say, 50-60 tests for prelims and 8 to 10 tests for mains. Yes. Subsequently, in 21, 22, 23, the basic focus was on upgrading the knowledge, note making, revisions, rather than giving the test.
Yes.
So tell me about let's say there is an aspirant named Sidharth who has cracked the examination, and he has got, let's say, post in telecommunication, and he's looking for something better. So how do you switch, or how and when do you switch the gears कि prelims का exam आ गया है, prelims पे focus करें, या मेंस का एग्जाम है, या फिर लगातार बस नोट मेकिंग और रिवीजन पे फोकस करते रहो और एग्जाम को उसके स्पिरिट में देके आ जाओ?
So I think if you're giving, like, if it's your first attempt and we've gotten a service, so after the result comes, the next prelims will be like, now this time around there was 1 month. So after the result also you can actually prepare within that 1 month. But then if the time is less, like if you already get to know the dates of the result and the prelims, so if you think the result and between the result and the prelims there's less time, then I think you should be preparing for your prelims, especially in your second and third attempt, right after your interview. Like right after, in the sense after 1 or 2 months after the interview, because you never know when the result will come, and if you think like there's a possibility of getting not getting the service that you want, then I think it's important to prepare for the prelims right after the interview. just some time.
Siddharth, we talked about the academic aspects of preparation, but there is another oftenly ignored aspect of preparation, which is the softer aspect, which is the emotional aspect. And in an exam wherein right from preparation to the result is a very long cycle. Sometimes it
Yes.
even takes, let's say, 1.5, 2 years.
Yes.
How, apart from syllabus, books, coaching, how do you balance and how do you manage your emotions and feeling, which actually at times I feel drive the entire thing? How do you manage and control the feelings, like the emotions like fear, anxiety, depression? हो नहीं पाएगा,
Yes.
how do you do that? Because that, according to me, is the most crucial aspect of preparation, which is very frequently or very oftenly ignored.
Correct, sir. So I think mental health and depression, doubts, fear, all that is like part and parcel of the whole process. Like I remember even this time around, just before my mains. So one day before the mains, I was not being able to revise anything. Like things were getting very, very serious in my head. I was not able to revise, and there's a lot of stress. Like you put in 3-4 years, and you're already in service, and then you've taken leave, and then writing again, and you have put in so much of serious effort, and then still you feel you don't remember one day before the exam. So a lot of thoughts go over your head. But somewhere I think it's important to like at some point you have to decide ki now it's about performance. Like I remember like something about Sachin Tendulkar in cricket. Yeah, there was some time when I think it's in the 2003 World Cup, he didn't practice in the nets the whole tournament. He was the highest scorer in that tournament. He was the man of the series. So I think at some point after your preparation is done, like you are saturated, at some point you have to like prepare for performance. Like at some point you have to say, okay, this is fine. I'll just focus on little more things, like 2 days before the exam, Monday before the exam, like before 2 exams. So at that point, I think a lot more of confidence, a lot more of your mindset, like whatever comes, you'll be able to attempt. That kind of mindset is more important after preparation is done. And during the preparation also, I think you have to have like some hobbies, something which interests you. So I used to play cricket. I used to go for playing cricket during my preparation also, although not very frequently, but at least once a week or something. I used to play badminton a little. Then every day I used to go and walk. Like there's a place called Wellington Island in Cochin. It's like a relatively like huge place, isolated. So I used to go on nature walks every day and then revise a little and then just have some nature time. And then I used to also go for movies a lot. Like someday I'll prepare for 8 hours, 10 hours. Suddenly I'm saturated. Suddenly at night, 11 o'clock, I'll go for a movie. I'll come back. Like I think don't be very rigid on like you have to put in 14 hours, you have to put in 10 hours. It's more about like what do you have to complete? You completed it, and whether you are saturated mentally. Like if you think you need some own time, you need some free time, then I think it's important to give that time also.
And how do you manage your mobile phone and the distraction it brings? I mean to say, because that seems to be the biggest problem which all of us face in life.
So I think social media, like I'm not very active on social media. Mostly I'm active only on WhatsApp, and there you actually communicate more with your friends, some close groups. So there I'm very active. Like I have some close friends with whom I like constantly chat and all that. But I'm not that active in other social media, so I didn't waste time much. But I think it's fine to be a little active, to have a little social time also. It's like about keeping it aside when you are studying, and then when you are like having a free time, it's okay. I feel it's about like different people have different approaches, and like in general about keeping the phone aside, I don't think it's very necessary, because suddenly if you have a doubt, if you want to think, like suddenly you can Google it, you can find something quickly, you know the sources, you can quickly find it out. So it's about what do you want to do, and distractions is all about your mental strength. I think it's up to you how you use the phone, how you use the social media. I think it can be easily balanced.
So another thing very interesting which has come out is that you have in this preparation, which is lengthy as well as rigorous, you have to maintain the balance, and in order to maintain the balance, you need to follow some hobbies which actually which excite you, about which you are passionate. Like what Sidharth just said, that he used to go for nature walk, he used to go to movies, because what I see most of these students doing is that whenever they are through with their studies, what they do is that they would start watching reels or start watching YouTube shorts, and after spending 1-2 hours on social media, they would still be not feel energized, and probably they would get further drained. So what is equally important, and probably what makes a lot of difference, is that are you following your hobbies which actually energize you, which actually, give you energy? That is very important. Another thing, Siddharth, you just said that, about friends. What role, what importance, or what role did friends play in this entire preparation, in this entire journey?
I have a relatively big circle of friends from non-UPSC, this thing, like my school friends, my college friends. So I am very close with many of my close friends in school and college, and we go on conference calls every weekend. And I think it's important, and it helped me also because somewhere it helped me to remove my mind away from UPSC a little, so that the stress is also relieved. We crack jokes on each other a lot, and then you're back to the preparation again, a little more relieved, re-energized, as you
No,
said.
but why I'm asking this, because in today's era, it is very difficult to find good friends.
Yes.
Friends who are not jealous,
Yes.
friends who really want you to do well in life,
Yes, sir.
friends who would love if you अगर आप उनको पीछे छोड़ के बहुत आगे निकल जाएं. And most of the times when we speak to our friends, बहुत सारी बातें बताने में ऐसा ही लगता है कि jealousy और envy वापस आ रही है. So how do you manage? Because सबको, or all your friends must be knowing that you have achieved this, and you are preparing for something bigger. So वो फीलिंग नहीं आती थी कभी फ्रेंड से, ऑफ कंपैरिजन, ऑफ जेलसी, वो फ्रेंड्स की तरफ से आना?
Sir, I don't think if you have good friends, that comparison and jealousy will be there. Although it might be there a little, but generally my time conversation with friends, it was mostly about making jokes. We'll comment on things that are very not so personal things. We'll talk about trips. We'll talk about a little about bikes or something. We'll talk about cricket. We'll make fun of each other. So we'll make it a little more lighter. And then I did have some UPSC friends also, like especially during my interview preparation stage. I used to go on, we used to have small sets of people. We used to do mock interviews, discuss current affairs. But mostly for prelims and mains, I was alone, and my friend circle was from school and college.
Any interesting moment or any interesting incident or any interesting story about the interview, since you have appeared in 4 interviews? कुछ ऐसा सवाल जो अटपटा लगा हो, कुछ ऐसा सवाल जिस पे अटक गए हो, कुछ ऐसा सिनेरियो जो बहुत फनी या बहुत ऑकवर्ड हो गया हो?
So I gave 4 interviews. I had 3 good interviews, and one second interview went a little down. It was in the 160s. All the other interviews were above 185. So in second interview, somehow there was a question on East European architecture. So my interview, every time it revolves around architecture, Kerala, design, something like that, because mostly my background and all that are relatively interesting. But that time somehow they asked about East European architecture. They asked about Turkish architecture. So I prepared about Indian architecture and famous architectural styles, but not exactly about East European, because it's not that famous. So I was not able to properly give a good answer. Then they asked about Turkish architecture. Somewhere it stumbled from there. It didn't go well from there. So that was slightly tricky. But then after that it went well. All the other 3 interviews were relatively very well. The flow was good. This time around, I think there were some very good questions. One question was about, so I had given heritage walk as one of my hobbies, again related to architecture. So they asked about connecting heritage walks and cricket. The first question the chairman asked me was, if you had to go on a heritage walk related to cricket in India, which are the sports you would go? So that are the sports you would go to,
Okay.
Connecting. So I connected stadiums. Places like Ramchandra Gowassa's book talked about cricket in the hills. So things like that. I tried to connect and gave an answer. And then another question was the next day after my interview was International Women's Day. So the last question that he asked was 10 women who inspired me. That was also very good. Although I didn't prepared for that specifically, I chose some IAS officers, IPS Kiran Bedi ma'am, Aruna Soundararajan ma'am, Nirupama Rao ma'am, and some cricketers, women cricketers, Harmanpreet Kaur, and finally I ended with my mother. So somewhere that emotionally, even I was confident that I ended the interview with my mother. And questions were also such questions I feel allow you to express yourself in a better manner, and they are also able to understand what values are close to you, what you represent. So I think in that way, some of the questions were very good.
So any or let's say top 3 misconceptions which you would like to bulldoze about UPSC preparation? Top 3 myths, top 3 misconceptions, or top 3,
So I think first thing, many people say, I think anyone can crack the exam. So that's the most important thing. Like, this is not an exam where it's directly proportional to your competence or your knowledge or anything. Although the effort is there. The second misconception is that if you put in, like, again, I feel effort and result is also not always concurrent. So you can never say that because you've put in so much of effort, the result will go your way. So there is a lot of randomness also. You have to accept the randomness. Just as in life, this exam also has a lot of randomness. And another thing, misconception about the exam, I think, like, during the exam, you'll feel that some people are good in this, some people are good in that. So he might be a little more better. Somewhere, I think you just have to trust the process. You have to understand that you just need to be good in all the things, like decently good, well aware. And somewhere, I think curiosity is more important than actually being competent in some subject. Like, if you are curious over a period of 1 year, over a period of 6 months, you'll be better than anyone else. Like, even somebody who has done law, who has a better understanding of constitution and polity, if you have put in 6 months of with a little more intent and a little more curiosity and a sense of inquisitiveness, I think you will be better off in 6 months, in 1 year than any other person. So that, again, it's not about actual competence. I think it's a lot more about your attitude, your curiosity.
So the last question.
Yes, sir.
And that is, I want you to share your secret. What is your secret? What is that gives you power? Because, writing exam after exam, year after year, working and, preparing and giving exams, there is something. What are the top 3 qualities which you think about yourself, which help you, reach wherever you have?
So again, there's a hindsight bias, like, because it worked, and thinking those are possibly the factors. So, like, first thing is, like, I somehow don't want to leave it. Once I've decided something, I don't want to leave it before I've reached there. And second is, like, I think some things can be taken positively on the ego. Like, when I got rank 189, like, the service was great, but somehow I thought that I deserved a little more better. 121, again, there was no change. It was effectively null and void, as you said. So again, it hurt a little bit of my ego. So I again thought it was not proportional. It was not like a good result for the effort that I put in. So in that way, I think somewhere you can take it on your self-esteem, so that you work harder. Like, you work harder on your mental self. And thirdly, I think mental strength. Like, I'm not saying everyone is mentally strong, but somewhere, like, I know that it is not about actual competence. Like, it's not like some people are geniuses. Maybe there are some geniuses, but I think effectively, if you trust the process, if you put in the effort, and if you are confident somewhere, like, it's more about getting through the game rather than actually being really good at it. If you are like let's say people like MS Dhoni, like, his technique is not that great, but if you look at the performance outcomes and everything, I think there's nobody who has equaled his feats. Yeah. So somewhere, I think it's about the attitude. It's about how you see the game, how clearly, how simply you put it. Like, somewhere, I think humility is also important. Like, you have to take it on your self-esteem, but then you have to be humble enough to understand that you are just like anybody else. You're not greater than anybody else. You're not lower than anybody else. So a lot of these factors possibly help.
What is that you were feeling before the results this time? Were you, I'm to say, were you hopeful, or कि भाई इस बार मेरे को मिल जाना चाहिए जो चाहिए, या अभी भी 50-50 लग रहा था?
So few days before the exam, I felt I'll not be in the list. Like, I was getting some feeling that I might not be even clearing the exam, not even anywhere in the list.
Okay.
Definitely not on the first page. Okay. I thought if I'm lucky, I might be there in 60s, 70s.
Okay.
Definitely didn't expect a single digit rank.
So that is why they call this exam a random exam. That is why they call that, you can't be sure about anything till the results come. So thank you, Sidharth. It was quite an interesting conversation.
Thank you, sir.
I learned a lot of things. I'm sure whatever you said and whatever we discussed will help aspirants in designing and deciding the course of their preparation. Thank you.
Thank you,
all
sir.
the best.
Thank you.